LaKesha, I need you to give me some kind of signal that tells me when to start. So I'm going to wait until you tell me to take off. So let me say good afternoon to everyone. I want to thank you again to LaKesha Womack for this awesome opportunity to be able to present to you today. My name is Kevin Davenport. I'm the senior advisor for the National Community Reinvestment Coalition based in Washington, D.C. And I've had an opportunity to pop in on some of the sessions that have taken place today. There's been a lot of rich content, a lot of awesome presenters, a lot of awesome speakers. And so we're just privileged at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition just to be a part and to share with you on today. And so what I'm going to do is kind of give a little bit of background about myself before we get into the presentation. Uh, I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. Had an opportunity to attend Whitney Young High School here in the city. Went on to do my undergraduate work at Fisk University. Shout out to all of those other HBCU grads. From there, I went to get my master's in theological studies from Vanderbilt Divinity School. And so I feel very much so right at home being a minister myself, former pastor, served on full-time staff at a number of a number of church organizations. And so I feel right at home being able to present to you all today, fellow ministry leaders and community leaders around some issues that are very, very important and pertinent to our times. So what I'm going to do is get right into our conversation, and I'm going to share my screen that's going to kind of provide for us a little bit of overview and backdrop in terms of what we're going to be focusing in on today. And the title of this particular session is Increasing Capital and Credit in Underserved Communities, Utilizing the Community Reinvestment Act. Increasing capital and credit in under-resourced communities, utilizing the Community Reinvestment Act. Just a little bit about who NCRC is. The National Community Reinvestment Coalition is a grassroots membership organization of about 650 individual organizations across the country. And we work to create opportunities for people to build wealth. Our membership includes other community reinvestment organizations, CDCs or community development corporations, local and state government agencies, faith-based institutions like the ones who are participating in this call, community organizing and civil rights groups, minority and women-owned business associations, as well as a number of local and social service providers from across the nation. We provide a number of services from training to counseling for home buyers and owners. We have a number of workshops and trainings that we do that are put on by our National Training Academy, everything from fair housing to fair lending. We also have a CDFI, a women's business center, a research team, as well as our policy team that advocates for us at the national level on a number of pressing issues that affect the communities that we care about the most. So for our discussion today, I want to talk about again how we use the Community Reinvestment Act to create wealth building opportunities for under-resourced communities. And so we're going to start with first a top line piece on what is the CRA. Then we're going to move to how to prepare your ministry to use CRA. And CRA stands simply for the Community Reinvestment Act. Why the CRA is so important. And then we're going to take a closer look at what this act is about. We're not going to get too granular or too in the weeds because we want to keep this light because this is going to be the first of a three-part series that we're going to be presenting for you over the coming weeks and months. First of all, what is the Community Reinvestment Act? The Community Reinvestment Act was passed in 1977, and the Community Reinvestment Act was a part of a series of legislative attempts to end discrimination in housing, including the Fair Housing Act, Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, and it establishes a continuing and affirmative obligation for banks to meet the credit needs of its entire community, consistent with safe and sound operation of the institution. The Community Reinvestment Act creates a framework for the community to engage with the bank. It's important to understand that the Community Reinvestment Act creates a framework for the community to engage with the bank. We believe that banks have the ability to be a source of hope for neighborhoods. Good banks have the ability to be an anchor for a vibrant community. They can also be as important to the success of a community as a great school, hospital, or business and entertainment opportunities. Like some public institutions, banks also have affirmative or public obligations. They have an obligation to address community needs. They have an obligation to produce a public benefit. We're going to be talking about that public benefit component in some of our subsequent sessions. But before we get to that, I just wanted to just give you a little bit of a highlight on what we hope to accomplish over the course of these next 3 sessions. So what I want to do is talk about how do we begin to prepare your ministry? How do we begin to prepare your church to even begin to engage in this particular conversation? Now, I know we're going to keep this at where you can reach it and grab it. We're going to keep this in kind of everyday language, but I think it's important to set the framework and the groundwork for how you can prepare your ministries to begin to engage in this work. And the first thing that is important to recognize is your relationships matter. Most of the time, it takes power to successfully engage with banks. A great source of power that most community organizations have is the ability to engage and coalesce a large number of similarly concerned organizations, agencies, and individuals around a specific issue. A successful coalition is capable of altering the balance of power within any given community. And so the first thing that is important to note as we begin to move into this conversation, if you're trying to figure out, how do I begin to prepare my ministry for this? How do I begin to get my church ready for this? You have to start by understanding that relationships matter. This is not necessarily something that you can do by yourself. You can't necessarily go out there as an individual or solo and then begin to see the type of changes that we need to see in our communities. So it's important to understand at the outset that your relationships matter, collaborations matter, and the ability to partner with other effective organizations matter. When you're bringing everyone together, you have to be prepared to answer this fundamental question that every individual is going to have. Every individual sitting in your pew is going to be asking this fundamental question: how will this action, choice, or event impact me, my family, my people, and my community? How will this particular engagement, how will me moving in and understanding more about the Community Reinvestment Act impact me, my family, my people, and my community? To the extent that you as ministry leaders are able to make that connection, not just as it relates to the Community Reinvestment Act, but on any social justice initiative that you're seeking to introduce to your congregation or your community, it's very, very important that you understand that your relationships matter. And as you're bringing together these different constituencies or relationships that you have, that you must be in the position to help them to answer this fundamental question of how will this particular action, choice, or event impact me, my family, my people, and my community. As we begin to now help individuals to unpack the answer to those particular questions, it's important for us to understand the role that self-interest plays as we're beginning to bring individuals together and prepare our respective congregations to engage in this work. And an understanding of self-interest provides the information to challenge and agitate someone based on what they want for themselves. We cannot get individuals to take action unless we have a fundamental understanding of what they first want for themselves. I don't know anyone that doesn't want to have better communities. I don't know anyone who doesn't want to have better schools in their neighborhood. I don't know anyone who doesn't necessarily want to have better streets and better paved roads. I don't know anyone who doesn't want to have to go to payday loans and payday lenders in order to get the credit that they need to engage in certain transactions. I don't know anyone who does not want these basic fundamental things that are so important to participate from a financial perspective in our society. One of the things that I still get as a minister over and over again is one of the top two prayer requests that most congregations have, or most pastors are confronted with, is some level of prayer request around finances, some level of prayer request around how I can't meet my bills, some level of prayer request around how do I deal with certain financial struggles or financial matters that I'm confronted with that I may not have necessarily anticipated or expected. So it's important for us to be able to tie these particular types of conversations into the fundamental needs that individuals have that are sitting in your respective congregations. Then it's also important that we think through how they see their own self-interest, because we can move someone from a narrow definition of self-interest in terms of what matters to me or my specific organization to a broader, more encompassing definition of what matters to us, our community, and our state. Here's why this particular piece is so important, because we have some particular members in our respective congregations. They believe that anything related to politics or anything related to public policy, anything related to social justice, anything related to all of those particular matters, they don't have a place in the church, right? They believe that the role and the purpose of the church is supposed to be to come in, make me feel comfortable, make me feel good about myself, my God, my family, and my community. But the reality of the situation is, if we're going to be true to the Christian mandate, if we're going to be true to the teachings of Jesus Christ, Jesus did not get crucified because he made everyone comfortable. Jesus did not get crucified because he made everyone comfortable just resting on their flowery bed of ease. Jesus was crucified because he agitated the status quo. He pushed the boundaries. He pushed the limits. And so it's important for us to understand, as we introduce these concepts of Community Reinvestment Act or any other type of social justice initiative, it's important that we not only tie that particular discussion to the individual self-interest, but it's important that we begin to expand that definition for them so that they can begin to understand why this is important for my church to be addressing this issue, why it's important for pastor to take up 5 to 10 minutes on a Sunday, maybe once a month or once every 2 months, to begin to talk about these particular matters, why it's important that we have social justice ministries that are focused in on bringing more resources to underserved communities, why it's so important that we begin to engage in these particular discussions. So as you're beginning to introduce this to your congregation, once you've taken a scan and you've gotten an understanding of your relationships, you've helped them to understand why this is important for them, you've gotten a deeper understanding of their own individual self-interest, now you're beginning to expand that personal self-interest to a collective understanding of interest in terms of what's for the best benefit of the whole. The mother of CRA that we like to refer to her as is Gail Sincata. And Gail Sincata came out with this very, very, very powerful and important statement. For the full responsibility for CRA enforcement has always been the job of people in the neighborhoods. It's important for us to understand that CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, this tool that we're going to be utilizing to bring additional capital and credit into under-resourced communities, is only going to be as effective, is only going to be as beneficial as the communities that are using it. Again, that quote is so powerful. The full responsibility for CRA enforcement has always been the job of the people in the neighborhoods. Now, someone is saying, well, why is it the job of the people in the neighborhoods? Why isn't it not the job of the elected officials? Or why is it not the job of the business community? Or why isn't it the job of some other level of entity? The reason why is for the effectiveness of this particular act rests in the people in the neighborhoods is because the people in the neighborhoods care most about their living conditions. People who don't necessarily live in your neighborhood, they don't have the same level of vested interest. They don't have the same level of care. They don't have the same level of concern. They're just driving in or driving out if they've ever been to the community at all. But the people in those neighborhoods, you know where the vacant lots are. You know where the boarded up buildings are. You know where there's issues of crime. You know where there's issues of disinvestment. You know all of the pockets of your particular community. So it's important that you take that knowledge. It's important that you take that information and begin to funnel it or channel it into more productive, more meaningful conversation. And the Community Reinvestment Act is one of the tools that will enable you to do that. And so we're going to begin to get right down in some of that particular discussion. Why is this so important? It's extremely important that we begin to understand the role that the Community Reinvestment Act plays, because the Community Reinvestment Act was created out of as a result of the redlining that occurred in the 1950s and the 1960s. Many of us have heard of those particular things. We're familiar with the history in terms of the impact that redlining has had on a number of our communities. And in this particular map, what you have before you is a map of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the Winston-Salem triad area of North Carolina. And in the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation surveyed cities to assign designations that would be used to shape investment. And red was used to identify areas to avoid, hence where we got the term redlining. And so you see in this particular map, from the 1930s, the areas that were essentially redlined, meaning these were the areas that investments were not taking place, banks were not necessarily providing loans and resources to those communities. And this particular map is again from the 1930s, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, the Triad area. What's astonishing is that when we look at the same map today in Winston-Salem, 97% of these red line areas are minority majority, and 86% of them are in low and moderate income communities. Let me say that one more time. Today in Winston-Salem, that same map that you saw before, 97% of those red line areas are minority majority communities, and 86% of them are LMI. Why is this so important? Because what we begin to understand as we unpack this, when we talk about conversations related to generational wealth, when we talk about conversations related to the wealth divide, when we talk about conversations as it relates to income inequality and in wealth inequality, we don't understand the genesis of these issues. The genesis of these issues can be traced back to some of the public policy practices that prevented Black and Brown people from amassing the level of wealth and the capital that they needed to be well-functioning citizens in our society today. And the remnant of those particular public policies are still being felt by those of us here in 2021. I want to go to another slide to begin to help you to understand the situation that happened in the city of Chicago, because some of you may be familiar with the fact that during the 50s and the 60s, there was this thing called housing contracts. And on average, the price markup on those homes sold on contract was 84%, because you have to keep in mind that, remember, Blacks were not allowed the opportunity to get home purchase loans. They were not allowed the opportunity to participate in the financial practices. This is the reason why the Community Reinvestment Act was created, to begin to address some of these particular issues. But for example, homes in racially changing neighborhoods that were purchased by a speculator, that's an investor thinking that the property is going to go up in value, for $12,000 would be resold just days or weeks later on contract to a Black buyer for $22,000. Think about that for a second. A speculator would go into one of these red line neighborhoods because, after all, they were the ones who had the resources to engage in the transaction and pay for cash. They would be resold just days or weeks later on contract to a black buyer for $22,000. That's almost 100% increase. African Americans purchasing on contract paid on average an additional $587 in April 2019 more each month than they would have if they paid the fair price for their home and had a conventional or FHA backed mortgage. Between 75% and 95% of the homes sold to Black families during the 1950s and 60s were sold on contract. So, over this two-decade study that was done by Duke University, the amount of wealth land sales contracts expropriated, that's taken out of Black communities in Chicago, was between 3.2 and $4 billion. I need to say that one more time. Over the span of this two-decade period, the amount of wealth land sale contracts took away from Chicago's Black community was between 3.2 and $4 billion. 3.2 and $4 billion that could have went toward financing some young person's education. 3.2 to $4 billion that could have served as a gift for some first-time home buyer in an African American community so that they didn't have to pay the primary mortgage insurance on their first home purchase. 3.2 to $4 billion that could have went toward the establishment of some Black-owned business. 3.2 to $4 billion of wealth was stripped from the Black community as a result of these particular land contracts. Why is the Community Reinvestment Act important? Because the Community Reinvestment Act was instituted to begin to remedy, to begin to correct some of these egregious practices from the 1950s and 60s. Our ancestors fought so hard to begin to get these particular gains so that they could begin to, we would have the opportunity to correct some of these particular issues. But again, I stress, as you saw in the quote from Gail Sankata, the Community Reinvestment Act is only going to work to the extent that you're willing to work it. And so I hope now you're beginning to see why this particular discussion is so important for our congregations to engage in. Why it's so important that we have more faith leaders who are able to engage in this particular type of discourse. Why it's so important that we maybe dedicate a part of our website or a part of some other level of information medium or communication medium to discussing these particular matters, because I am 100% convinced that the challenge we face right now as a community is no longer necessarily the same as the challenges that we faced from the 50s and the 60s. The challenges that we face today, yes, there's still racism, yes, there's still oppression, but there is also an enormous information gap. There are people in our pews, people in our communities that don't have access to the information that they need to make the collective difference that they seek to make. And it's important that we begin to empower our pews, empower our laity, equip them with the resources that they need so that they can begin to go out and have some of these very, very important conversations. I'm going to skip that slide and go to one of the pieces that the CRA is, one component of how the CRA is supposed to work. And I'm not going to go in the weeds of this. I just want to give you a top line understanding that's going to kind of get you ready for our second session and our third session that's going to be coming in the weeks and the months to come. But how well the bank is reinvesting back into the community through community development investments and grants, such as supporting organizations that make loans to low and moderate income communities, that's what LMI stands for, and small businesses such as CDFIs, which is Community Development Financial Institutions, and CDCs, which is Community Development Corporations. Banks are assessed and evaluated based on their ability to execute on these particular functions. So if you are CDC or if you have a CDFI that you're familiar with, it's important that we begin to talk about how can financial institutions partner with CDFIs so that they can begin to provide some of the small business technical assistance that are needed to budding entrepreneurs that exist in our community. COVID-19 has decimated the small business infrastructure of African American community, absolutely decimated. We've all seen the statistics. We've all heard the reports. I don't need to give you any additional data as it relates to that. We're going to need financial institutions. We're going to need these banks to partner with these CDFIs and to begin to create loans for these particular businesses to get back on their feet. And I'm not talking about the type of loans where a small business owner is going to have to pay 15% and 20% and 25%, but I'm talking about low interest, zero closing cost loans that will allow these particular individuals to get back on their feet. We're going to need CDFIs to begin to be able to have more liberal underwriting procedures, or what's called a more open credit box. Why? Because we know so many individuals who have either lost their job because of COVID-19. You had whole entire industries that were required to shut down. And so as a result, what happens? Sometimes you might miss a bill. Sometimes you might miss a payment. And so if individuals' ability to begin to get themselves back on their feet is going to be predicated strictly on the credit score, then we already know that there's going to be challenges there. So we need to have products that these banks are partnering CDFIs to do, as well as banks should be taking on new products and new services to begin to meet a different type of customer that is going to be coming to them post COVID-19. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about that in our second section, but I just wanted to just put that out there at the start. How is CRA supposed to work? The service test. We first had the investment test. Now we want to talk about the service test. And that essentially measures the bank's effectiveness at providing basic banking services to low and moderate income borrowers, primarily through its branch network. One of the things that hurts me and is very, very disappointing to me is that there are some communities that the only thing that exists in those communities are either payday lenders or currency exchanges. There's absolutely no bank branch presence. There's absolutely no place where the individuals can begin to go and cash their checks. And so as a result, there's entire communities that are left with nothing but payday lenders and currency exchanges to engage in basic banking needs. We've also, research has also shown that in communities where there is a bank branch, those communities have a higher rate of receiving small business loans. Where there is an absence of a bank branch, the percentage or the rate of small business loans in that particular community drastically decreases. And so it's important for us to understand that the CRA also governs how banks provide services to the particular communities that they receive deposits from. I already talked a little bit about the investment test, but now I want to talk about the lending test. How is CRA supposed to work as it relates to the lending test? This test assesses how well the bank is serving the credit needs across four main areas. That's the mortgage, meaning that's home purchase loans, small business, those are small business loans for individual business owners, consumer loans, as well as community development lending. And those particular four metrics are how banks are assessed or evaluated as it relates to their lending tests. And again, I'll go into a little bit more about this in some subsequent sessions, but I just want to provide a top line overview today just to kind of give you some basic understanding and framework of why this particular conversation and discussion is so important. Now, you would have thought that with all of the disparity, with all of the disinvestment that is happening in under-resourced communities, you would have thought that there would have been more financial institutions failing their CRA exam based on the metric and the evaluation measures that we just outlined. But in 2014, 98.26% of all banks passed their CRA exams. Let me say that one more time. 98.26% of all banks passed their CRA exam. Only 1.74% failed. Let me go back to the quote from Gail Sankata. CRA will only work to the extent that neighborhoods are engaged, neighborhoods are taking ownership, and neighborhoods are doing their part to making sure that it works. Because the Community Reinvestment Act, as I said in one of the earlier slides in the beginning, it simply provides a framework by which communities are then able to engage with these banks, and it creates a playing field, if you will, that allows community stakeholders to begin to engage the banks around some very, very key issues around lending, service, and investment. And so I'll get into some subsequent sessions how that process goes. But again, I just wanted to just lay a baseline framework for how this particular process works and why this particular discussion is so important. CRA enforcement and why get involved. Get involved because you want to improve bank performance, especially if they're not serving everyone. If you're living in a community and you know for a fact that banks are not stepping up and doing their particular part, then it's important for you to engage in this particular conversation. Now, I need to say from the outset, for those of you who may just be timing in, this is not an anti-bank message. This is not a message where we're beating up the bank or bashing the bank. This is a conversation around how do we help the bank fulfill their mission, fulfill their objective. How do we position community stakeholders? How do we position community institutions to be able to more effectively partner with the bank so that they can execute and be more successful in carrying out their mission and their mandate that they have as a service provider? So why should you engage in CRA enforcement? First and foremost, to improve bank performance, especially if they're not serving everyone. Secondly, you want to increase resources for community development. I don't know where you may be viewing this particular webinar from, but there's a number of cities where the cost of affordable housing is through the roof. There's so many individuals who are struggling to figure out where can I buy a home because the cost of housing has just gone up astronomically. And there is a need for more affordable housing in our communities. Not only is there a need for more affordable housing in our communities from a home purchase side, but there's also a need for more affordable housing in our communities from a rental side. And so it's important for you to engage in this CRA conversation because you want to see an increase in resources for community development in your respective community. Third reason why you want to engage is because you want to direct more resources into underserved neighborhoods. Again, that's the title of this workshop. How do we bring additional capital and investment into under-resourced communities? The Community Reinvestment Act is one of the primary tools that we have at our disposal to begin to create more investment opportunities into these areas that we care so much about. And then lastly, why should you get engaged? Because you want to build partnerships with the financial institutions. As I said, this is not about beating up the bank. This is not about attacking the bank. I know some of you may be saying, but I'm not necessarily a protester. I'm not necessarily a person that believes in going out and picketing. I understand. I feel you. Everybody's not necessarily for that particular type of action and activity. I myself am one who I support those who do it, but I'm not necessarily one who leans in that particular direction. I do believe, however, in making sure that we take the laws and the rules and the regulations that are on the books, figure out how we work them, how do we begin to make those particular laws and regulations and rules that are on the books to be for the benefit of those particular communities that we care so much about. So why should you engage in CRA activity? Because you want to build partnerships with financial institutions. That's all I have for right now. This is my contact information. Kate, you can email me if you're interested in getting additional information at kdavenport@ncrc.org. You have my phone number there at 202-383-7719. I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this particular point because I think we are supposed to have an opportunity for a few questions. And I'm going to ask LaKesha if she would join me or however this is supposed to go, because I don't see the chat box on my respective platform. LaKesha, are you there, or am I supposed to just read this off? So what I am going to do, I do see some pieces in the chat. The first question I see is, how can we find out about the contents of what CRA exams consist of? That's a great question, Chuck. Thank you so very much for that question, Chuck. One of the things that I'm going to be doing in subsequent sessions and workshops is I'm going to go over a whole piece in terms of getting into the weeds, in terms of the CRA exam, how to put together a comment letter, when are the instances where community-based organizations have the most leverage over financial institutions, those two instances being one, when a financial institution gets a needs to improve or fails a CRA exam. We already see how infrequent that occurs. But then the other instance is when a financial institution merges or acquires another entity. And then in that instance, this Community Reinvestment Act states that banks have an affirmative obligation to state how this particular acquisition or merger is going to create a public benefit. And NCRC, I'm happy to report, has reached roughly over $250 million. That's billion with a B in community benefit agreement dollars that we've begun to deploy into communities as a result of our community benefits agreement process that we've engaged with a number of our financial institutions. Some of those particular agreements are on our website at ncrc.org. I encourage you to look at those and check those particular pieces out. But again, I will be going into detail in that process in subsequent conversations. How can the CRA assist the church in the community? This is a question from Pastor Patricia Bufford. Great question. One of the primary ways that the CRA can assist the church and community is, what are the communities most concerned about? Communities want to make sure that they have good quality homes. Seniors want to make sure that they have an opportunity. I mean, most of us, if we've been in church any period of time, we know that seniors, they're living on fixed income. They're doing the best that they can. And sometimes they have need of home repair. Sometimes there may need to be a ramp that is placed in their house. And there's all kind of scams that take advantage of our seniors when they find themselves in these particular situations. The church can use the CRA to help push financial institutions or encourage financial institutions to make more accessible their home repair lending products, so that our seniors have the ability to age in place, so that our seniors have the ability to get the necessary financing and resources that they need to make their houses more ADA compliant. How many seniors want to be able to go home and spend their golden years at their houses, but they may not necessarily have the resources that they need to outfit their house so that they can have the type of support within the house so that they can stay in their respective homes? That's just one way. Another way that the church can use the CRA to assist their community is by encouraging more and more financial banks to partner with community development financial institutions and the like to stimulate the small business economy in a number of our communities. We already know that the fastest growing job creator in the United States is through small business. And so to the extent that we can create a strong small business community, to the extent that we're able to begin to push the envelope and motivate financial institutions to begin to live up to their obligation in serving the community, then the CRA is a tool that we can increase. The CRA is a tool that we can begin to utilize to increase economic activity in our respective communities. We also can encourage financial institutions to engage in affordable housing projects. A number of churches engage in a number of those particular projects. I know a number of congregations who've engaged in, building out senior facilities and retirement communities and affordable houses and homeless shelters. And I can go on and on with the type of initiatives that a number of our faith-based institutions have taken on. The Community Reinvestment Act, again, is one of the primary tools that we can begin to use to help execute on that particular front. I think I have answered all of the questions that I see in the chat. LaKesha, give me some kind of signal in terms of where do we go from here, or
Yes,
what?
I have questions. I have questions.
Okay.
So a lot of people may not know, but I actually worked with NCRC through a previous executive director and with the state organization. So that is one of the reasons why I wanted us to partner with NCRC, because of the great work that you all do and the fact that so many church communities don't know about these programs and are not tapping into these resources. So one of the things I would like for you to maybe discuss, like some of the local groups. I know in Alabama, we had the Building Alabama Reinvestment. Are there other state or local organizations that people can tap into to get connected so they don't feel like they're trying to start this work by themselves?
Yeah, and I didn't get into that particular portion of it, but there's several different ways that individuals can engage with us. We have a very, very strong membership presence in Chicago, in the state of Illinois. We have a very, very strong presence in the state of Ohio, have a very, very strong presence in the state of North Carolina. We just did a huge North Carolina digital event this past fall. We were supposed to do an in-person place-based summit, but because of COVID, we could not do in-person events. And so we have roughly 200 and something individuals who attended our digital event that we did for North Carolina. Very, very well attended. All of our sessions did not have fewer than 100, 150 people in them, all of them from the state of North Carolina. We also have a very, very strong presence in Wisconsin. Very, very strong presence in Alabama, as you indicated, from our board chair, Bob Dickerson, current board chair, Bob Dickerson, a very, very strong presence, Northwest Indiana. There's a number of areas that we are deep across the country, and that's what shows the power of NCRC. The power of NCRC is the fact that we have all of these particular local entities across the country in these respective areas, CDCs, CDFIs, a number of faith organizations. I have a number of pastors. I'll share this one piece. We had a pastor who was really trying to address the issue of food scarcity and food security in his community. And so many of the communities that we care about the most, they're struggling with this whole thing in terms of food desert and food security. And so they put together a proposal that basically allowed them to go purchase the square footage that they needed. And they put together a proposal. We worked with one of our financial institutions that we had a community benefits agreement with. We were able to come to terms. And now this particular faith-based entity that was started by a group of pastors are now going to be operating somewhere in the neighborhood of a 15, 16,000 square foot healthy food option grocery store, where they're hiring the people in the community. The bank worked with them to get the technical assistance that they need from Kroger, because there's some back-end mechanics that they need to accomplish. And that's just one example. I can go on and on of the number of examples of how we have partnered with faith entities to begin to utilize the Community Reinvestment Act to address these particular issues. That's just on the food side. We're not even getting into, like I said, the housing side and some of the other different pieces. And all of this activity is happening all across the country.
So one of the things that I learned from my time with NCRC was that sometimes we have trouble getting bank or financial institutions to buy into our projects because they're too small. And so we think that, oh, it's too much, we're going to ask for less, when actually banks are looking for those big projects, those big partnerships to get behind, more so than like the small kind of $5,000, $10,000 projects. Is that still true?
Well, again, this is the reason why I go back to the quote that I referenced from Gail Sincata. CRA only works to the extent that you're going to work. It is only as strong as the people who in neighborhood and community. Because we heard that very thing from a number of our community-based organizations. They were saying, look, we can't necessarily get capacity building dollars because our operational budget is too small. Or look, we can't necessarily get the resources that we need because we don't have the work history from the perspective of the financial institution may not necessarily feel like we can successfully complete the project. And so one of the things that we did just in the community benefits agreement that we just went through, because I'm literally just coming off of a period where we had 15, we've never done this before in all of I've been in NCRC for 6 years, and we've just completed 16 local market meetings with two major banks over the last 3 week period of time, over 300 organizations across the country. And I'm really excited about what's going to come and the level of investments and the level of resources that are going to be deployed as a result of these two major benefits agreements that we hope to be announcing over the next coming weeks. And part of that discussion entailed uh, getting into the agreement for some of those particular entities. What are you doing for nonprofit organizations who have operation budgets less than $250,000?
Right.
How are you assisting those small CDCs who are tied to neighborhoods, who may not necessarily have the 7 figures or the 8-figure budget, but they have passion, they have heart, and they are concerned and committed to their community, demonstrated by their desire to stay there when they could have left the community, and they really know what's there. What are you doing to support them? And so we really work with the bank in hearing from some of our community-based organizations on what are some of the things that they need. And so it's even down to creating those particular lower ramp entry opportunities for those CDCs who fall into that category, specifically neighborhood associations,
Right.
because in this particular instance that I'm thinking of in St. Louis, Missouri, this particular individual, they committed to the St. Louis, Missouri community. They've been a part of the fabric of that community. They have an organization that's less than $200,000. They were looking at also doing something around the issue of food, because of the fact that food scarcity and healthy food options is such an issue in a number of these particular communities, and really working with the bank to begin to figure out how do we craft philanthropic dollars that are geared toward meeting that particular target audience. The other thing that we also heard is that it's hard for these smaller CDCs and smaller nonprofit organizations to scale and improve or increase their capacity when they have to apply for a grant every year. They don't know if the funding is going to be there from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. And so what we did was we encouraged financial institutions to develop multi-year grant cycles. Instead of just having this 1-year annual piece where people have to apply every year and not knowing if their funding is going to be there from year 2 to year 3 to year 4, so they can't engage in the type of long range strategic planning, we encourage the financial institution to begin to put together, as a part of their philanthropic tools, multi-year grant cycles. Now, did every single one of them do it? No, but a number of them did. And so it's about really targeting down and really honing in on some of those particular pieces. And I'm glad that you raised that, because those are some of the things that we were able to accomplish.
So we do have a question. Do you have a presence in New York State?
Yes, we do. We have a strong presence in New York State. One of our board members, Matt Lee, is in New York. We have a number of our one of our former business board members, Hubert Van Tol, the father of Jesse Van Tol. He's also a retired board member that's in New York. We have a very, very strong presence in the state of New York. And I don't want to kind of get into naming people and all of that for this particular piece, because I'll get in trouble if I forget some people.
Right.
But yes, we do have a very, very strong presence in New York as well as New Jersey. Very, very strong presence in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in that whole Pennsylvania area. Very strong presence in Pittsburgh. And so we have a very, very strong presence throughout that entire region. Strong presence in DC, of course, strong presence in Maryland. We're, heavily involved in that East Coast corridor.
Yeah, and just to give you guys an idea of what that means, when there is a presence, that means that there are people who are familiar with this work. So if you tap into them, then they know how to get you connected to existing projects. So instead of you feeling like you have to start the ball from scratch, you can connect with a coalition in your state or in your area that's already doing the work. You guys also do an annual conference. It hasn't passed this year. It's coming up, right?
No, so glad you asked that question. I didn't want to do any shameless plugs because
We're all about
you asked me, and so thank you for giving me the opportunity now to do the shameless plug. We've had an annual conference. That is actually our flagship event.
Yeah.
Our annual conference is our flagship event. We have over 1,200 individuals from across the country who all descend on Washington, D.C. for 3 power-packed days of training, networking, engaging. Some of the speakers that we've had at our annual conference include Janet Yellen. She was the chair of the Federal Reserve at the time. Now she is the Secretary of the Treasury. We've had the president of the NAACP, Cornell Brooks. We've had the president of the National Urban League, we'll say the former president of NAACP, Cornell Brooks, the president of National Urban League, and Mark Morial. We've had Maxine Waters. We've had Congressman Greg Meeks. We've had a number of, and we've had Reverend Willie Barber. Billy Barber, who's also spoke at our annual conference. We've had Jesse Lewis Jackson. We've had a number of individuals who keynoted our events. We've also had our annual Hill Day, which our individual members love because they have an opportunity to go to the Hill and meet with their particular representative. And so we did not do it last year because of COVID. So we had to cancel it. Everything was canceled because of COVID. We were really hoping to do it this year, and then we're still in COVID.
Right.
So what we are doing, though, is we're doing a long digital event that we're extremely excited about. I encourage you to go to ncrc.org. You'll find all of the information that's going to be there as it relates to our upcoming conference. It's going to be all digital, but it's been also a blessing for us because now the cost to participate in the conference is much lower. You don't have to pay for the airfare. You don't have to pay for the hotel. You don't have to pay for all of the other different things. And then the content, if the content was already off the chain, content is going to be even more off the chain because some of the speakers that we may not have been able to get because of all, like I said, the cost limitations for travel, we can get now. Just to give you all an idea, and I probably shouldn't be doing this, but I'm gonna do it because it's LaKesha, and she extended us this opportunity.
Open the door.
I want you all to begin to support LaKesha for the great work that she's doing. We have already had over 300 submissions for session topics. That is how powerful this movement is. That is how powerful this conversation is. We can't even satisfy even a third, not even 10 to 15% of the session topics that people want us to begin to address. So this is a national conversation. This is a national discussion on the cutting edge of really reimagining what reinvestment looks like in these communities.
Yes, and I definitely want our audience to connect with you guys, and especially when we go back to in-person conferences, because the NCRC, just a day on the Hill, is like nothing you will ever experience because you're paired with other people from your state and you're going to talk to your Congress people about economic issues and creating a just economy. And you have talking points and the meetings are already prearranged for you. And so if you really want to get into the advocacy level work, NCRC is a great organization because they have a history. They're respected on the Hill. And so people actually listen when we walk in the rooms. And it's one of the best advocacy events that I've ever participated in. So definitely want to encourage our members to connect with you guys because, again, that's what this is about, partnership. Because we can go and take like our little church members on the Hill, or we can take our church members with NCRC members and go on the Hill, and to have that many people in a room, it speaks volumes because it lets the Congress people know that we're serious about these issues.
Yeah, and I just want to say something. Uh, you know, I know for some of you, you all may not necessarily be familiar with who we are and so forth. Um, I need to really say that I'm not just saying this because I work for the organization. This isn't a person just trying to give you a soundbite. I fully believe in this cause. I am firmly committed to bridging the wealth divide. LaKesha will tell you, she sent that communication over. I said, the schedule is tight, but
Right.
we're going to do what we need to do to try to make this work because I have a soft spot for the faith community. I was born and raised in the church. And so this isn't necessarily a thing of where we're trying to engage in what my pastor would call smoke and mirrors.
Right.
There's a lot of substance here.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you the number of community-based organizations who come to me and say, I've never met with a bank CEO. We're not talking about the regional president. We're not talking about the market leadership. We're talking about the CEO who leads the earnings conference call when the financial institution reports their earnings on a quarterly basis. And to be able to get a forum with that individual, not in a room of 600 or 700 people, but because we've assembled 20 or 30 of our influential members across that particular geography and engaged in a substantive conversation about what that particular bank is going to do in that particular community from the top down. And so I can't tell you how many people are shocked when they hear a person of color, me, a black person, come to them saying, I'm going to get you at a table with the bank CEO. And they're saying, you mean to tell me the bank CEO is really going to be there? And they really think I'm blowing smoke. But I
Right.
encourage you to talk to any one of the individuals who participated in this, because this is a level of access. And this is the reason why I said during the presentation that we suffer from a lack of information. We
Mm-hmm.
suffer from a lack of availability to the resources that we need to effectuate the change that we so desperately want to see. And so, again, Community Reinvestment Act only works to the extent that you work it. This is not necessarily shamelessly plugging an organization. All of us at NCRC work entirely too hard on a day-to-day basis because of the fact that we all are committed and care about this particular cause that we're discussing right now. And so if you can come to the conference, it's a great thing to do. If you don't want to necessarily engage in chat, and if you're watching this particular piece later on, you can go back, scroll back at some other point in the screen, find my contact information. You can reach out to me. I'll plug you in to all of the different things that we're doing. And I have not even scratched the surface in terms of the magnitude of what we have. And so I'm looking forward to the subsequent sessions that we'll have to begin to dialogue and discuss this a little bit further.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted you all to come for a 3-part series, because I know the scope of work that you all do, and to try to condense that into one session it would be mind blowing to people. So I think this is a great introduction. And I do want to highlight the work that you all did around payday lenders some years ago. Like, a lot of people don't know that was work that NCRC was involved in when they saw that payday lenders were charging like over 100% in interest rates in communities, primarily communities of color. And that's a work that you all were heavily involved in. I know when I was working with Bob Dickerson, that's what we were working on in Alabama, was around payday lenders. Like, those are the types of issues when you see it happening in your community and you're trying to figure out, how do I change this? How do I make a difference? These partnerships are where you can start to make a difference, because now it's not just you and your congregation and your voice, but you're partnering with people who know how to get you seats at the table and in front of the people who can actually make a difference. So I thank you for making time, because it was like the 11th hour, and you are committed. And I don't mind the shameless plug, because I want our members to connect with your organization, to take advantage and become members and get involved in the advocacy work, because we're not going to build generational wealth just by sitting asking for crumbs. We have to be at the table asking for a piece of the pie. And
Can I go a picture you a little bit further? Not a piece of the pie, the pie.
The pie, yes.
Okay, and because a piece of the pie will not help us to make up the deficit.
The deficit, yeah.
Right, and so we are coming to the table saying, "Where's the pie?"
Yeah.
Right? Where's the pie? Right? We really want to help people to understand that if we all collectively work together, if we all roll up our sleeves and engage in the work that needs to take place, we can then begin to ask people for the pie.
Yeah. And I think that that is so important, because when I see a lot of the projects that ministries are trying to get off the ground, it's going to take like a huge capital investment. And so they're trying to, raise money from their members, and they're doing bake sales and pie sales instead of looking at tools like this to get financial institutions involved, because that's a part of their obligation being in the community.
Let me say this about this, and I'm an ordained Baptist preacher, and
You've been preaching all morning, so go ahead.
no, I really was trying not to.
You can't
I
help
really
it.
tried not to, but um, you know, when I was growing up in church, my grandmother uh, was the president of the usher board, and the usher board had their annual fish fry, and you got the catfish, the spaghetti, the coleslaw, and the piece of white bread.
Yep.
And that was the fame in that white styrofoam, white
Yep.
foam container, right? You got the bread, catfish, spaghetti, and the coleslaw, right? And you got a slice of 7-Up cake or sour cream cake, but it was some kind of pound cake. That was the annual catfish dinner menu. And all of the ushers it was about 50 of them, would be released, and they would take orders from their job. They would take orders from their schools in terms of going to school. They took all of these orders, and grandma was down there 16 hours on the annual Fish Fry Day as they fried catfish. And then they had a whole army that had to then deliver these catfish orders to the people who ordered them that wasn't coming in. You had people that came to the church to pick up catfish. After all of that, they may have raised $4,000 or $5,000.
May.
And with all of that labor, with all of that people power, they may have gotten $4,000 or $5,000. The mortgage on the building was $15,000 by itself. So with all of that labor and with all of that people power, they could not even pay for a half of a mortgage payment.
Wow.
And so the point I'm saying this is, if we're going to move the needle in a substantive way,
Right.
we have to get to this place where we avail ourselves to greater instruments and greater resources. Yes, I can understand that it can be intimidating for some. Yes, I can understand that it can be complex for some, which is the reason why I wanted to come on here, make it as palatable as possible, to whet your appetite to the point to say, look, let us do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
We'll do all the getting in the weeds and do all of the back end. We have a whole policy team, research team, crunching numbers. I didn't get into the home mortgage disclosure. I didn't get into any of that. We do the heavy work for you.
Yeah.
We just need you to be open, willing, committed, and dedicated to bringing about transformation in your community. And to the extent that we can continue to have those particular types of partnerships collectively, is the extent that we'll begin to see meaningful change in our communities take place.
Yes, you guys definitely want to come back in May when he starts to get into more detail, because there is a research team, there's a policy team. So when you go into those meetings, you have numbers, you have statistics, real numbers and statistics, not something that you Googled and tried to figure out for yourself, but they're proficient at doing this work. And if we're going to close like that wealth divide, like these are the tools. It can no longer just be tithes, offerings, donations, but we have to hold the institutions who are supposed to be doing this anyway. Because I remember when I first started doing advocacy work, I graduated from Vanderbilt. That's why I said VU. That's where I did my undergraduate.
I didn't realize you went to Vanderbilt. Okay.
I did my undergraduate, and my first job was working as a campaign manager. And so, the Vanderbilt side of town, and then the TSU Fisk side of town. And I remember we were campaigning because this area was the TSU area. And at that time, they had not made an investment in that area. And so I'm like, y'all need to go try to get some of this money. And the people were like, the city doesn't have any money. I was like, wait, what? Because being on Vanderbilt side of town, it's like, it's money. They're building a hockey stadium downtown. There's money. But a lot of times in our communities, they get away with saying, we don't have it, we can't approve it, we can't do it, when they're really not supposed to do that. They're supposed to be making those investments. And now the state representative that they are making a bigger investment because he knows what to go in and ask
Is
for.
Harold Love your state rep?
Yep. I worked on his first campaign.
Yeah, Harold Love is doing an awesome job there in Tennessee.
He
Let me say this. Because Harold and I graduated from Vanderbilt Divinity School together. Let me say this.
Really? I gotta tell him.
The thing that I want to say, because you raise a very, very important point as it relates to the role of city government. COVID-19 has literally wiped out the city budgets of a number of cities across the country. They are really doing everything they can to just basically barely hold on, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have the resources. They weren't anticipating this. The revenue that they would have normally expected to receive, they could not get because most of the economy was shut down. And so what we're doing right now is we're pushing financial institutions, we're pushing banks to begin to engage in the heavy work of putting together COVID-19 relief programs. We encourage one bank to come up with a COVID-19 rescue product, COVID-19 recovery products, both on the home purchase side, as well as the small business lending side, as well as the type of community development lending and investments that we need to take place in community. Why? Because we know that the cities are going to be short in terms of the resources that they have. And so these are the types of substantive conversations we're already in the presence of having. We've already got some wins that are really going to make a difference in a number of communities across the country. But I can't emphasize that point that LaKesha said enough.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times what happens when we're not educated on these products, even when you all do the heavy lifting of getting them in place, when we're not educated, then the banks say, well, we didn't get any applications. Nobody applied for it. So either the money doesn't get used or it goes to other communities. And that's why it's so important for us to be at the table and to know what's available and what's out there so that we can apply. And then the question becomes, why did you deny them? Not you didn't get any applications, but what was your reasoning for denying them? And that's a whole other conversation that they have to have that they really don't want to have because it holds them accountable.
Yeah. So let me say this, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it. I'm known to push the envelope from time to time.
That's what we do around here. You're in good company.
But this is also a recorded video that's going to be streamed in I don't know how many different places at some point in the future. But one of the things that I think is important to note is that we push financial institutions to have staff that look like the communities that they serve. Mm-hmm. We know that people do business with who they're most comfortable with. Yeah. We know that it's important that bank personnel are representative of the communities that they're located in or they receive deposits from. And statistics have shown that this is not just the issue for African Americans, but it's also an issue in terms of our Latino and Latina and Hispanic brothers and sisters. It's also an issue for Asian Americans. It's also an issue for a number of other groups who may not necessarily speak the language, may not necessarily be able to read English. How are we making sure that we're building the tent wide enough and big enough in making sure that no individual is left out of the opportunity to participate in the economic process? And we've had financial institutions say to us, we're struggling finding certain staff. There was a person who made that statement famous by saying that at one point last year. And so what we say to them is, look, work with the community-based organizations, work with the churches. There's people in these churches, partner with these faith-based communities who have their pulse on the community, who know what the issues are in community, who understand the situations at hand and really know the community in and out. Work with these particular groups to find out what needs to be done because it's not like the wheel needs to be reinvented.
Right.
I mean, we have the city of Milwaukee and that surrounding area. We have
Mhm.
one significant financial institution. They did, and I didn't get into all of these numbers, but we will in subsequent presentations. They did four originations to African Americans in the whole year. Now, I'm not talking about a community bank. I'm not talking about a small credit union. I'm not talking about a small credit union that's a part of a church. I'm talking about a major financial institution that, if I named their name, many of you on this call would know. Four loans to African Americans in the whole entire area of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This is the reason why this conversation is important. This is the reason why we have to get in the weeds. This is the reason why we need the conversation. This is the reason why, again, we take the time as NCRC staff to get the information out there. Our founding president, John Taylor, says the NCRC is the best kept secret, and he wants this to no longer be a secret because he wants us to make sure that as many people understand this. Our current CEO, Jesse Van Tol, he's doing everything he can to make sure that we connect with entities like this to get the message out, because I cannot stress enough how we all are going to have to be involved. We all are going to have to roll up our sleeves, and we are going to have to be engaged. Maybe, LaKesha, I'll take two more questions from you, then I'm
No,
going to hop on out of here. We're good?
Because you're coming back. You guys make sure you register for May. Make sure you come back in July, because this is an ongoing conversation. This is the beginning, because I really want you guys to be educated. I want you to understand what CRA is and how it works, and then of course how you can use it to have an impact in your community. So thank you so much, Kevin, for your preparation, for your time today. We're gonna let you go like 3 minutes early. That may not be a lot, but
No, thank you, LaKesha, for having us. You're doing awesome work. Thank you to each and every one of you, pastors and leaders and ministry leaders, for the work that you're doing in community. We're standing with you. We're praying for you. And we're praying God's blessings upon each and every one of you.
Amen. Everybody take a break, and we will see you guys back for the next session. Thank you again, Kevin.
Bye-bye.